Hello. So today, we're telling a story about the world a long time ago. There was a tribe filled with quite a few families, maybe 6 or 7 different families, that had traveled along the coastline. They had just introduced their newest baby, Shell. He was a little one, his eyes blue like the ocean, and named after the pearly white shells that would show up right there on the coast. Now Shell, he was quite a rambunctious little one. He was always getting himself into trouble. He was always swimming out into the middle of the ocean and then showing everybody just how strong a swimmer he was and swimming all the way back. It scared his family a little bit, but he always made it back. And he never really hurt himself either. He was a strong swimmer, and because of that, as Shell grew older and older, he became widely known for being part seal. Now, obviously, he wasn't part seal. That's just ridiculous. But it meant that if anything got lost, or if he needed to go out to hunt with his little spear, that he eventually got as he turned of age, he would be able to go spearfishing out on the little coastline that was just outside of reach. It meant that only he and some of the strongest swimmers in the tribe could go out there and get the food that was necessary for the rest of his family. Shell was very important for that, and he continued to stay very important throughout the tribe. But he was still young. Shell was still only barely coming of age. He had just gotten his spear for the first time. And so he still was quite unaware and quite unwise about the way that the entire world worked. So one day, as his family went to sleep, and the tribe to sleep with them, he woke up. He saw the little glowing coals that were still in the fire, and he put a couple of them into an empty, hollowed-out coconut husk. It started burning the husk, but he knew just how to use some of the tree saps that were around to be able to keep the fire going for a very long time. He was very clever. Quite ingenious, really. And he started walking around the coastline nearby where the tribe had camped. He could hear all the animals, the crickets. Sometimes he could hear scurrying around the forest floor as lizards or maybe even small rodents darted to and from. And he saw a majestic tree, a giant tree, a tree he had never seen before. Whoa, he thought to himself as he saw this tree that stretched into the sky, and even in the pitch darkness he could see just how daunting it was, how terrifyingly awe-inspiring it was. The tree itself had branches that were the size of other trees, and it was so big around the base that it seemed like an entire forest would need to have been chopped down to provide the nutrients to provide for this tree. But there it was, at the base of a river, basically holding its own against the powerful, erosive effects of the river. And he saw so many animals. Not very well, obviously, in the darkness of the night, but he saw them. He saw birds flittering in. He saw giant moths going up there to suck some of the nectar out of its giant flowers. He even saw a few bats flying around and darting after some of the insects. It was quite the paradise, quite the ecosystem, he thought. It had so much life, so much nature, and he got to be a part of it. He got to witness it. As he started to go home, he turned his back to the tree and heard something snap behind him. A twig, it sounded like. And he looked behind and saw the reflective eyes of something. He wasn't sure exactly. He had seen certain raccoons that lived out by him, and even some mountain lions before that had eyes that glowed just like this when he looked back at them. But no. Instead of running away, he knew he would have to stand and fight. Getting ready, he put his torch back up and said, "Come here. I'm ready for you." And waited. And the eyes got closer and closer. But then he heard something, a soft meow, as it got closer to him. What is that? This must not be a mountain lion. That was much too sad and innocent. So he started running up to where the eyes were, and the eyes didn't dart away like he was afraid they would. He knew that this creature was comfortable, or very hurt, one of the two. So he had to make his call now. Okay, I need to save this creature from whatever it is that's chasing it, or I would need to help it. So I still got to be ready, but come on. And he darted forward. Now Shell, as he dove by the eyes that he saw the smallest kitten he had ever seen in his life. It was brown and had gray furs on its undercoat, and it had this sandy face. Oh my goodness. This kitten is adorable, he thought. He had never seen a kitten so adorable. But he had to look around. There has to be a mother somewhere around here. And I can't risk stealing a cub from a mom. That's just not good. But the kitten was so sad. It was meowing, and it seemed to be beckoning him to go deeper into the underbrush with him. Okay, he thought. This might be a trap, but I don't think any mountain lions can set a trap up this elaborate. So he started walking with the kitten, and the kitten seemed to be limping, and it had a couple bite marks on its back. Oh no, he thought. It's taking me right to something dangerous. And he heard some twigs snap again, and he grabbed the kitten and said, "Okay, we can't stay here any longer. We've got to go." And he picked the kitten up and started bolting back the direction he came. He ran and ran and ran, and he heard something behind him, something snapping twigs, something going so fast, and something that seemed almost at his heels as he screamed, "Ah!" trying to get away from it. Just then, some of the birds and the animals that were living in the trees swooped down and dived right next to him to protect him from whatever it was, and you can hear a soft squeal as it ran away. The birds flitted back up and returned to their roosts. He had to take a break underneath the giant tree with its giant blossoming flowers, and took a look at the little kitten he had rescued. "I'm sorry about that, buddy. I didn't mean to scare you. I just wanted to help you out today. I'm sorry." But the kitten seemed tired. It too was exhausted. So it yawned and fell asleep on his arms. He had to make a decision then. Take the kitten or take the torch. He decided for the kitten. He wasn't completely familiar with these woods that he was trapped in, but he was a pretty decent navigator, so he was sure he would be able to find his way back home. He arrived back into his home, into the little camp that his tribe had set up, before any of them had waken up, and put the kitten to sleep right next to him, underneath a bed of leaves, in the sands that were near the hot coals. They stayed warm all night, and upon awaking, They stayed warm all night, and upon awaking, the whole tribe seemed curious as to how this kitten had gotten where it was, and how it got so attached and bonded to Shell. Where did you get it? How did you find it? Is it safe to keep around? So many questions got sent Shell's way. He didn't know how to answer all of them. So, he did his best to answer them as best as he could. I found it in the woods. There was this giant tree. It was hurt. I ran away from this giant beast. All these things, all together. None of the tribe seemed too worried about the kitten that was now taken in, and Shell was pretty good at doing what he could do. So, they just let the kitten stay with Shell. As long as it wasn't causing any harm, and as long as Shell made sure to find the food for it, there was really no harm in keeping it around. If anything, when it got a little bigger, it might be able to scare away some of the rodents that sometimes ate some of their storages. So Shell decided that he wanted to go take it for a swim. They swam in the ocean, and the little kitten was not a good swimmer, but it wasn't overall too bad. He wasn't scared. He didn't seem to be very much upset by the fact that he was in the water. In fact, he seemed to kind of like it. Almost like that was his home. Shell laughed. There's no way that this kitten could be from the water. That just doesn't make any sense. But they swam anyway, and picked up the meals that they needed for that day. Shell dove in and let the kitten float on top of the water, but noticed that the kitten seemed to dive with him, and had really good agility for being inside the ocean, and managed to catch his own fish while he was down there. Shell was impressed. He didn't know very many animals that would go out into the ocean, let alone open their mouths underneath the water, not drown, and still catch their food. So, as Shell went back, he realized that his little kitten buddy was special. Kiba, he named it. And he and Kiba were going to go and explore the world together, the oceans, everything. It just so happened to be that the tribe had heard about this giant story, and they had told the story up to one of the village elders, to one of the tribe elders. And the tribe elder mentioned something about Shell's path to adulthood. He's coming of age, and he seems to have already found the giant sequoia. The giant sequoia that brings wisdom and empathy. Shell was summoned to the Grand Elder, and as they sat together in their little cot, the Grand Elder told them stories of their ancestors, told them stories of all the people who used to live on these coastlines, stories of how the coastlines used to be farther down, how there used to be canyons that they would still walk through, how these sands were just new creations. Shell was impressed. He'd never known that so much could have been going down in the water. But the Grand Elder said, Shell, you and Kiba, now that we know that you've saved this little kitten and you plan on keeping it, you and Kiba must go visit our ancestral home. We try and do our best to visit whenever we can, but none of us have been strong enough swimmers to get through the ocean that it now covers the old villages and towns that were there. We used to be sedentary. We used to have lands. But when the oceans rose, we needed to flee. So that's what we did. Just underneath that island out there, way across, there is a city. There is a giant stonework that you need to visit. And once you do, you will find something and bring it back and know that you have become a man. Shell nodded. Then that's what I'll do. I'll leave tomorrow. Don't forget to take Kiba, your little lion. He's going to be very important for you." He nodded. The next morning, Shell took off. He told his family where he was going, and their family was so proud that their son was going to be the one who bridged the gap between their ancestors and the modern world. So he swam and swam and swam through the deep ocean. He swam past his normal hunting grounds. It seemed like such an easy swim now. He had so much energy. He was so excited to see the things that were hidden under the seas. And as he swam more, he began to realize just how exhausting trudging through all this water was. But it wasn't too hard. It was difficult, yes, but he had done harder endurance swims before. And Kiba seemed just as excited to be going on this trip with him. After about an hour of swimming, they finally reached a small little coastline just across the way on the strait where the island was. They rested on the beach there, and the sands seemed to be of a different kind of quality. They weren't white like the sands he had just swam from. Instead, these sands were black, ashen almost, as if fires had been started on these sands, and little bits of the sand had been turned into harder, clear substance. He didn't know what this could have been, but it didn't matter. He was here for a reason. So he said, "Kiba, get down, buddy. Get off my shoulders. I'm going to go climb up and grab us some food." And he found some fruit in a tree. Kiba, being the ever-industrious hunter, found himself a little bird. So they ate a lunch, drank a bit of water out of the coconut, and then dove into the water. Kiba followed, and the two of them swam down, holding their breaths and letting go just little bits of air. He remembered all the things that the elders had told them before about breathing and doing these deep free dives. And as he got farther and farther down, he started to begin to notice how murky it was. It wasn't murky from the top, it was practically crystal clear. But with so much water to look through, how was he ever going to find what he was looking for? And then he saw it. A bell tower. Now, he didn't know what a bell tower was. He had never seen one before, and it was made of brick, stone, and mortar. Something that just didn't exist in the world that he had seen. This was incredible. Inside the bell tower was still a giant brass bell. It looked pretty weathered at this point, but as he touched it, he felt the sound of the bell reverberating in the ocean around his hand. Whoa, he thought, and was looking for something, the thing that he was told by the elder to come down to find. And he saw that there was a ladder that went down farther. So, he swam down. He figured if there's anything that we need to find, it's going to be down there, wherever that takes us. Kiba seemed a little worried. The little kitten didn't have a whole lot of air left in his lungs. So, the two of them went back up for air, making sure to take their time, as to not hurt themselves as they went back up. He smiled at Kiba. "Good job, little buddy. You're doing great. Now, we need to do one more dive, and we're going to get the thing that's inside that building. I know it's in there. I don't know what it is that I'm looking for, but I do know it's got to be in there." And as he dove it back in, Kiba followed. They swam into the area that had the ladder, and went into this pitch black area. Where was he going to find lights? Where was he going to be able to see anything? And just then, the entire inside of the building lit up with a fake fire. What is this place? He thought, as the entire ceiling of the building started to light up. Where are we? How did this get here? And he could see inside the building. There were tons of rows of wooden benches, all or set up and facing toward a single direction, toward the front of this building, where there was a small table, and on it, a map. He could see that this map looked incredibly different from anything that the village elders had ever described to him. Even the crude things that they had drawn before on the floor, the stories that had been passed down by all the people from before times, all his ancestors. Even their maps looked nothing like this. There was a little red dot on the area, a little red dot on a coastline of something with a big, swoopy, round, half-circled letter, and it looked strange. Oh well, this has to be it, he thought, and as he picked it up, the map had a clear coat of something on it. Strange. But he couldn't fold it, and that clear coat seemed to be protecting it from not only the water, but also from being bent. All right, Kiba, come on, let's go. And they started to swim back up. He stared in amusement at this giant glowing building now. It glowed so brightly under the sea that he could see a bunch of the other creatures that had started to call that area its home. Fishes darted in and out, and even a couple sharks. He knew he needed to get out of here, take a small break, and then head home. So, as he and Kiba finally made it up, they rested on the beach. They were exhausted. Their lungs were burning. They had been underwater for maybe a little too long. So, they sat and they waited. But they could hear some snapping in the distance. And then some stomping, some clomping as it was going toward them on the beach. And that was when they saw a wild boar charging at them. They both ran. Shell grabbed Kiba and they jumped into the ocean, the little map in his hand. And they started to sprint out, trying to swim as fast as they possibly could back to the other shore. That boar was angry, and it was picking up speed. Even though they had dove into the water, the boar seemed relentless, unwilling to give up. So Kiba jumped off of the shoulder of Shell and gave a quick scratch onto the boar's face. "You got him! Kiba, come back," Shell said, and Kiba began to swim after. The boar stopped and returned to the coastline, snorting. They eventually made it back to the village. There at the village, they presented the map to the village elder. And the elder took a look at it and drew the map that had been passed down throughout all their knowledge that had been given to them from their ancestors. They corroborated the map with the crude map that they had in their memory and said, "This is where we are. And these shapes, these squiggles, this is writing." The village elders have always been told of a secret language that was told by all the people who came before us. This says California. I don't know when, and I don't know how, but our ancestors once lived here in the greatness of this coastline, at a time when the coast used to be much farther out. And now, it's gone. All the lands they once lived in, under the ocean. But we are here living their legacy. And we will one day find a way to make the ocean go back and take over our ancestral lands again, reclaiming them for ourselves. But until that day, Shell, you are quite the mariner, And you, well, you are a man. Well, I couldn't have done it without Kiba. Thank you for telling me to bring him, Shell said out loud to the village elder. Well then, we'll just have to make sure Kiba knows that he's a man now too. The two of them got quite the feast that day, as he had proven his worth to the tribe, bringing a relic from an ancient time, a time when there used to be something white on the mountains, a time before the oceans had swallowed up so much of the land. It seemed to be a much more complicated time. But they lived in the now, and maybe one day they would find a way to rebuild what their ancestors once had. But until then, they would work on their skills and bring back the knowledge that was lost under the sea.